And welcome back to another movie review. This time I saw Monsters University, the prequel to Monsters Inc. Overall, it wasn't a bad film. It's one of those Disney Pixar films, just like Monsters Inc. and Toy Story and Finding Nemo and all that other stuff. It's meant to be cute, but at the same time entertaining enough that adults can like it too. So it starts out with little Mike, the little green eye guy, in case you don't know his name. He's basically probably like 3 to 5 years oldish. I'd assume he's 5 because he's in school. But he goes on a field trip to Monsters Inc., basically, I think it was, or one of the other scare factories. And he decides at that point that he wants to be a scarer when he grows up. He decides to go to Monsters U because one of the adult scarers that's actually nice enough to take a moment to talk to the kids, especially Mike, tells him that he learned everything he knows at Monsters University, and he gives him a hat. One of the other guys says that Fear Tech, I think was the other school, was better than Monsters University, but whatever. They don't really do much with Fear Tech throughout the thing. I thought it'd be more of like a rival school type of movie, but it really wasn't. So they show up in class, first day, and he's doing all the orientation stuff, and turns out his roommate is the lizard guy from Monsters Inc., the one that's their nemesis or whatever through the whole thing. Then they introduce Sully, or James Sullivan, whatever you want to call him, the big bluish purple guy. I forget how they first encountered each other. I did watch 3 movies tonight, and I'm doing all these reviews right after the movies. I'm not doing them like go watch a movie, do a review, go watch the next movie, do the next review. I'm doing watch all 3 movies, then do all 3 reviews. So I got 3 movies worth of stuff running around in my head right now, and it's a little hard to remember all the details. But anyway, they meet up on campus, and they don't hit it off right away. They're kind of rivals. Then oh, okay, I remember. Now, I thought they met before this, but Sully's chasing the scare pig around campus, and it gets into Mike's room. Sully comes into the room after it, basically wrecks the room. Tries to introduce himself, and Mike kind of blows him off, like, you dumb jock, what are you doing? It's kind of a Revenge of the Nerds type of thing. So then, that's like the only tie-in to Fear Tech is that the scare pig was Fear Tech's mascot, and they stole it. Then he says, I gotta take the pig down to this mixer that we're having, for all the scare students. So then Mike decides to tag along, and that's when Sully kind of blows him off because Mike blew him off earlier. So when the big scarers in the big fraternity are taking interest in Sully, and there's like, oh yeah, come on inside, this party's for scarers, and Mike's like, I'm a scarer too, and they're like, no, you're a joke. Which they had another guy in their fraternity that was basically Mike with like spider legs and lobster claws, but other than that, he was just kind of the same thing, just a little short, round guy who wasn't scary. So why they were saying it's only for scary people and Mike wasn't scary when the other guy wasn't that scary either, I don't know how he really fit in, but he did. So then Mike and Sully start to have a rivalry about who's going to be better in class, and at first Sully's kind of stealing the spotlight because he's big and scary, but then Mike starts to show his brains, and Sully only has like his one roar, and the professor's eventually like, it takes more than just one roar to be a professional scarer. So then Mike starts to shine a little bit. So as the rivalry goes on, they both get kicked out of the scare program. by the dean. So then she says that they'll never be scarers. So then Mike says, we have this all scare competition coming up. It's like, again, to Revenge of the Nerds, it's kind of like the Olympic Games thing that they did at the end. So he's like, you have these scare games, and I'm going to put together a team, and if my team wins, then you let me back in the scare program. And the dean says, if you win, I'll let your whole group back into the scare program. So, because basically he had a group that was made up of people who were let go from the scare program because they just weren't scary. There was like an older salesman guy, a young nerdy kid, his mother, the two-headed twin guy, and then the random oddball. So, the dean accepts the challenge, but Mike's fraternity is one member short, and Sully's been kicked out of his fraternity, so he says, I'll take the spot. At first, Mike's like, no, not you. And then they're like, well, sign-ups are closing, so it's either him or nothing. He tries to get the lizard guy to join up, and he's like, sorry, I'm already with the fraternity, because he'd taken Sully's place in the big fraternity. So Mike reluctantly says, okay, fine, you're on the team. They sign up, and then it's just a matter of these obstacle courses they gotta go through. And at first, obviously, they're the washouts. Mike and Sully are so heated in competing against each other that they don't realize that it's a team event, and unless the entire team finishes, they don't get any points. So then they start trying to whip the team together. They still fight a little bit, but then as time goes on, they realize they got a lot more in common than they thought. And so they start to become friends. The team starts to get better as a team. Then it comes down to the finals, and Sully goes and talks to the dean. And the dean says, you really have no chance of winning because, admit it, Mike's not really scary. And Sully goes, yeah, you're right, he's not. It's because the last event is all 5 members of your team, or 6 members or whatever, have to go through the scare simulator where they got the small child in there. You do your roar and it jumps up. And then you get scored based on how much energy you would have drawn from the scream, and then your team's total is tallied, and whoever has the higher score wins. So it comes down to, they're basically tied up. It comes down to Mike's finale, and he basically wins. And then as they're kind of celebrating, you find out that Sully rigged it. He broke the controls and set it to easy scare. And the rest of the team finds out, and they're all kind of bummed. The whole evening's ruined. So Sully goes and admits it to the dean, and the dean's like, obviously you guys have lost, but I'm not sure how to deal with you yet. And then there's another incident where there's a class at the school for making doors. Like, they actually craft doors out of wood, open them up, and see where they go to. There's an incident with one of the doors, so the dean goes to take care of that. And Mike sneaks in and goes through the door and kind of locks everyone else out of the lab because he's going to prove once and for all that he's scary. So he goes in, tries to scare the people, doesn't work. Sully goes in to try and rescue him, like, hey, we got to get you out of here before you get in trouble. Then, through a team effort, they are able to scare a bunch of adults, which is rare, I guess, and actually causes an overload in the screen system back at Monsters University. So the dean's like, how did you do that? And Sully's like, don't ask me, Mike did it. So then they call in the Monsters, Inc. crew, the decontamination crew or whatever, and they're basically like, we're going to keep our eye on these two type of thing. The dean decides they're expelled from the school, spoiler. And because they've been expelled, they can't really get jobs as scarers. But then they're reading the paper, and Mike goes, there is another way to get a job at a scare facility. And he turns the paper over, and it's something that was alluded to earlier in the movie that you thought was just kind of a throwaway thing, the way they threw it out. But basically, the ad is to join Monsters, Inc., working in the mailroom. So they join up with the mailroom, and then the credits roll, and it's just all these pictures of them, like how they were the best team in the mailroom, and then they got promoted to janitors. They were the best janitor team. They got promoted to something else. They were the best team of that. Then they finally eventually moved their way up to scarers. And then you have Mike's first day on the scare floor. He's standing there at the line, getting ready to cross into the room. And he's got, and then Sully comes up behind him, and he's like, "You ready, buddy?" And then they just walk off, and that's basically the end. Like I said, overall, it wasn't a bad movie. It was kind of cute. One thing about it, they showed Mike as a little kid, but they didn't really show much of Sully as a little kid. I would have liked to have seen a little bit about like what he was going through, because like his dad and his grandfather were famous scarers, I guess, and it would have been kind of interesting to see like, maybe he wanted to be more like what Mike was and not really be a scarer, but was brought up in that environment. So there was always the expectation of living up to your father's image. I would have liked to have seen him explore that a little bit. Just, like, what was Sully doing as a kid? You showed us what Mike was doing. What was Sully doing? Actually, I would have liked to have seen a movie just of them as little kids, but obviously if they met in college, that wouldn't have happened. But yeah, just the Monsters, Inc. babies type of thing could have worked. Another thing, I almost wish it wasn't a prequel as much as a sequel. Like, you could have had Monsters, Inc., and then instead of telling us the story about how they met in college, just take us to the college and have it be, like this new generation of scarers are coming in. But I guess you couldn't really do that with Monsters, Inc. the way it ended, because they switched to laughter instead of screams. But had they stuck with the screams, you could have this new generation of scarers coming in. At one point, they break into Monsters, Inc., and they're kind of up on the roof looking down through the window. And that's when Mike and Sully kind of have a bonding moment about who their favorite professional scarer is. But it would have been kind of neat to, if it had been like a new college class, like when they got up on the roof there, that's when you would have saw Mike and Sully as just like they were in there working instead of the other way around where they're up on the roof looking down. It could have just been a small cameo part for the movie, but instead they made the whole movie about those two, so there's a couple things they could have done differently that I think would have made the movie a little bit more interesting than what it was. But like I said, overall it wasn't a bad film. It was meant to be cute. I wasn't bored with it. It was enjoyable. As far as a star rating, I don't want to give it a low score because it wasn't bad, but at the same time, it's the same movie Pixar basically always puts out. Let's go with a 3.5 on this one. I was going to do a 4 because it is a decent film. It deserves a 4, but at the same time, it's kind of repetitive at this point with Pixar. It's just like now they got Planes coming out, which is basically Cars 3, but with airplanes. Yeah, so, 3.5. Before the film started, there was this new short. Pixar does shorts before all the theatrical releases now. This one was The Blue Umbrella. It was designed to test out some new animation features and shading techniques, I guess, from what I read on it. Overall, it was a basic story, Male object sees female object, falls in love, they drift apart somehow and find their way back to each other. But overall, the animation on it was really nice. It almost looked really realistic. The shading, I don't know, what I was supposed to be looking for as far as that goes. I didn't really read that far into it. As far as an animation, it was basically the same thing that they always put out, but it looked really nice. The realism in the animation has come a long way. The people are still a little wonky, but like the buildings looked real. The rain looked real. At first, when it was just people's feet walking down the street, I thought it was real people until I realized that it was the animated feature. So the CG's actually come a long way. Not much more to say about that. Just wanted to mention it because it was there. So that's basically Monsters University. The other movie I saw tonight was Now You See Me. So I'll be back in a moment to talk about that. Until then, again, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the movies.